Once you get a little taste of that, oh, I'm skeptical of all grand narratives. That's how you find yourself in the anti-vaxxer circle, right? People who go, I don't like big pharma. I hate that. I don't like big pharma. I hate for-profit healthcare. Will very easily find themselves, because they find themselves like in a permanent contrarian attitude.
A high-level character in the company was bragging about, regardless of whether America stays a democracy or not, the insurance companies, specifically theirs, had a plan to continue to extract money from people. They're like a site that spreads, a zombie that can't quit eating. The top brass was making absolute moolah. They would want for nothing. Their great-grandchildren would want for nothing, even if they quit tomorrow. And the eye was on always expanding the company. There's no such thing as having enough. Even in a drastic scenario where for some reason our country just completely...
Just curious, what's your stance on universal healthcare, like unrelated to the situation? My stance on universal healthcare before the situation and after the situation remains the same. It is a moral imperative. And it is immoral and unjust that we do not have universal health care in this country. It's also not unrelated to the situation at all. This is a Vice piece on a person that works for a U.S. healthcare insurance company.
Crumples in on itself. They're still going to be going after you. I worked for one of America's largest subrogation law firms. When your insurance covers a cost for you, they can make somebody else responsible for repaying that amount. This is where insurance subrogation comes in.
That's not even my take. A healthcare CEO getting popped and people celebrating is an indication of class that's been earned by the predatory capitalist society. Healthcare is just the easiest topic to get people to agree with you on because everyone has a negative experience with it. Okay, but your skepticism isn't hallucinating. I don't know for a fact how he was caught. I'm simply saying I'm more inclined to believe in conspiracy than the current narrative. I know. Because you're perma-stuck in believing in grand narratives and conspiracies. Squash that part of your fucking brain. This is a very important aspect of what I try to instill upon my audience. Contrary to what my naysayers and my haters might say, it is concerning how ready you are to believe in grand narratives. Okay? Sometimes things do make sense. Okay? In this circumstance, it does make sense. The issue as to why a long-term community member could find himself in the throes of this kind of conspiratorial thinking, for the record, if people are wondering why I'm so aggressively in pursuit of squashing out all these like alternative conspiracies, is because that kind of conspiratorial mindset is anti-materialist inherently. And not only that, but also I think it leads people down scary paths. It leads people in, you know, if you believe in this one conspiracy, there are a shit ton of other conspiracy theories you could believe in as well down the line. It's not only counterproductive, it's not only silly, but it's worrisome. Once you get a little taste of that, oh, I'm skeptical of all grand narratives. That's how you find yourself in the anti-vaxxer circle, right? People who go, I don't like big pharma. I hate that. I don't like big pharma. I hate for-profit healthcare. Will very easily find themselves, because they find themselves like in a permanent contrarian attitude to the media and to those in positions of power, without critically examining what you should be critical of, is exactly how you arrive at the likes of Joe Rogan and many others who go, well, I don't really like for-profit healthcare insurance, and the media is telling me to get vaccinated, so I'm not going to get vaccinated. Do you understand? And it's ironic because half the time, the federal government or the State Department is actively trying to create these like conspiracy theories themselves. And sometimes it backfires. If you know anything about anti-vax narratives, the American government quite literally tried to instill anti-vaxxer sentiment in the Philippines. Okay, they went to the Philippines and they tried to actively undermine Sinovac. China was doing soft power in the Philippines by offering at no cost their own COVID vaccines. America didn't want that, so they wanted to create skepticism against vaccines and actively spent millions of dollars trying to get the Filipino population to be skeptical of the vaccine. How fucking insane is that? And that very same attitude and that very same perspective exists very much in the United States of America as well. How do we arrive at so many like-minded individuals who are maybe even in certain instances well-read? How do we arrive at a situation where there's so many of these guys who believe in anti-vaxxer shit? It's because they just don't believe that the government, they don't believe that the government has the capacity to ever be truthful about anything. If we didn't have proof of what you would call chatters who thought that was possible schizos, what? I don't simply adopt a contrarian position because the government said something, okay? I examine the biases that institutions hold, and I also look at it critically. Who stands to gain from this? What do they stand to gain?
Job was to call people and harass them for money. We would hound you at best and harass you at worst. Many times I sat at my desk thinking, I am literally just a debt collector. Collectors were treating the people that they were calling as something to extract from, not seeing them as other humans. I saw a lot of abuse, verbal abuse, of course, not having any kind of empathy for anybody's lifestyles or situations. We had a system of notes that would show what was discussed with the claimant previously. So there was this lady that had a lot of notes in it, like, she's lying, she keeps giving a sob story. I spoke with this lady and was giving her the general spiel. And she cut me off and she said, I don't know why you guys keep calling me. I'm telling you, I'm on hospice. I'm dying. Like, I am in my sister's living room, in a medical bed. I am dying. Her sister got on and just, screaming, like, just please leave her alone. I didn't know what to do with myself because what do you say to somebody like that?
A decades-old study found conspiracy-minded people will rate directly conflicting conspiracies as more likely than the traditional narrative. E.g., they will rate it more likely for Elvis to have been assassinated and even more likely for him still to be alive in Barbados than the mainstream OD cause of death.
It was probably one of the lowest points of my life. I would see frequently people were bringing in like $30,000 a week. There's hundreds of people working for this company. There was a lady that worked there for 16 years. She was one of those top 5 and just...
What is this? Humans inherently seek out a narrative to make the chaos of the natural world make sense to them. This is the source of religion even. Stop looking for a grand narrative. Assume the simplest explanation is the correct one before entertaining further ideas. People, I think, cling to this mindset that the government is so diabolical in those conspiratorial ideas because it gives them comfort to think it's so grand scale and beyond what they can change or influence themselves. Is often a simple explanation is something they do have the ability to influence or change. The former gives too much power and solidifies a narrative fools can digest. Yeah. I think people also personally assume that, like, because there are so many harms that you're experiencing on a regular basis that that the government must be all powerful. But that also is inherently contradictory. Like, the government is both so powerful that they can set up a patsy that is virtually impossible to contradict. Okay? But they're not powerful enough to also engage in mass surveillance and find the actual shooter. Like, the State Department, do they actually have patsies, or do they actually activate like random lone wolf attackers? Do they urge them on? Certainly. They do that with regular frequency. They do that usually to pat themselves in the back and celebrate their W's, that the FBI is actually out there working at the behest of the public. You know, they'll find like a random autistic teenager of Muslim background online, and they'll goad them into doing, and they'll them and then goad them into doing an act of terror only to stop them right before it happens. That kind of stuff is covered extensively by even mainstream media. Okay. The problem is, on the one hand, they do that. Okay. And that happens. On the other hand, those things usually happen in the margins. Those things usually don't happen in broad daylight in front of millions of fucking eyes. Okay. And the profile of a person like that is very different than HasanAbi FBI handler. Thank you for the 5 Get the subs. The profile of a person like that is very different than the profile of a guy like Luigi Mangione, who has like extensive social media footprint, you know, who had friends, who comes from a wealthier background.
Thousands, tens of thousands of dollars were being brought in just by this one woman. We are incentivized to take the most amount of money from these people as
Free use Femboy, thank you for the 5 good subs.
possible without letting them know. We had full reign on adjusting what they would actually have to pay if they settled. We're paid on commission through a fee structure. So if they are making good faith payments, say $250 every 2 weeks or $250 a month, we would get 15 to 20% of that as a fee. If we were to settle a lower amount for them in fees, and fees are what our commission is based on, the system was set up that if we showed any kind of humanity to these people, we were screwing ourselves over. And I can't tell you how many times I got in trouble for just trying to be a decent person. We are supposed to be doing this by the book. A lot of these cases,
I think all matter of conspiratorial thinking is inherently is against anti-capitalist or against materialist ways of thinking about things. You slam a conspiratorial puzzle piece into every equation you possibly can, because the simple truth, a materialist analysis of the world, is too simple, where you're like, oh no, it's too boring, it's too simple. There has to be some larger there has to be some larger power players at play here. No, but literally, I just had double jaw surgery a week ago, and my insurance company literally called the goddamn hospital room in the middle of the night while I was in so much goddamn pain, just hours after the surgery, to ask if I needed anything. Clearly, just a way to get me to ask for more drugs. Like, it's so fucking scummy and devious. Your Alex Jones is a Fed theory. Yeah, I think Alex Jones could potentially be a federal agent, or I used to think that. A psyop in general, because every now and again, he lands at a real conspiracy and he hammers that on over and over again. Mass surveillance by the federal government was one of them in the 90s. People laughed at him, but ultimately, he was right about that. Meanwhile, he was also incredibly wrong about a ton of other conspiracies. So when the guy you're listening to has one correct conspiracy and then 98 very obviously silly, idiotic conspiracies like interdimensional vampires and the like, yeah, people are going to not believe any of the things that he's saying. That's why I used to say that Alex Jones is most likely a fucking psyop. But I don't think that he was like a federal project concocted specifically to make people not believe in any of the very obvious, very overt ways in which the government does harm to people, like mass surveillance. If the guy who's constantly chirping about mass surveillance also believes that there are lizard people around, most individuals capable of critical thinking are going to go, well, that's probably not the most truthful agent of criticism here. I think for me to believe a conspiracy theory, there has to be a shit ton of evidence. That's precisely the reason why I guess have a different attitude on Jeffrey Epstein killing himself, where I do not believe the mainstream media narrative on that. The whole or the parapolitical sphere is about how you can mask anti-communism is crazy talk.
When people don't exchange their insurances at the time of the wreck because they're like, oh, it's fine, there's like barely a dent, my insurance will cover it. Later, when the insurance company hunts them down because they don't know that that person has insurance. That's why we're supposed to be getting their insurance. Like, that's the first thing we're supposed to check for with each call, because they might have insurance and not be on the hook for any of this. So a colleague saw me in the middle of a call, told me to pause the call, asked me what I was doing there, said I was not there for customer service. He pointed out the fact that I am poor. And he said, if I were you, I would focus on winning and not on making sure that these people have insurance or not. You need to get money. You don't need to get their insurance. That was a part of the job description, things we were trained on. If they had insurance, we were supposed to collect the data on that. And when the people that have that responsibility to do their work correctly are in it just for the greed and are completely skipping out on certain steps, lives are needlessly ruined. We would call you sometimes multiple times a week until we got the money. Just completely would not stop. I experienced one with a lady. It was a flood damage in the apartment downstairs. And the lady actually did have proof that it wasn't even her fault, but we were still pursuing her. And I tried to send it back to where we double check things. And they're like, no, she's guilty. And I'm like, no, look at the paperwork. She has clear proof that it was actually the apartment above her. And we were still calling that lady. You really can't hide. We used a program to pull up dossiers on people. So if you had the lack of luck for having the same phone number as a claimant used to have, if you worked with them, ex-spouses, we might call you. Basically keep chipping away until we find the claimant. One of my coworkers called up a wife of a man that was a truck driver. He owed roughly $55,000. And this lady was completely blindsided about this. She didn't even know he had been in a wreck. As she is becoming more and more panicked, the reality of the situation settling in, he's becoming more and more chipper. And he actually turned around and high-fived me once she started to cry. Some of the techniques I witnessed people using to harass the claimants. One person was very misogynistic towards women, would talk down to them, call them baby girl. Another person would spend his mornings conversing about different ways to lie. They would find loopholes in, say, this person might live in a state that they can't have their driver's license taken from them, but we could still threaten that maybe because maybe the state might change their mind one day and make it legal. It was quite blatantly a lie, and we were encouraged to tell that lie. One of the tactics we were supposed to use on people that said, I don't have any money, tell them, hey, do you smoke? Quit smoking. Different things that we're supposed to use as examples of things that they should quit in their own life so they can pay us money. We were told to tell them, take out some credit cards, high interest loans. That's a cycle. Once you start borrowing from one high interest thing to pay another thing like that, you're in a bad way. It's an endless loop of misery. This experience was harrowing, just a cold splash of water in regards to what I thought our society was capable of. You would hear people screaming at people on the phone and then go to lunch and have a coffee and just happily talk about something they did on their... We were completely incentivized.
This, by the way, is yet another way in which the distribution of different hands that engage in this kind of violent and cruel behavior creates not only plausible deniability, but also creates a structure where the people don't feel as though they are engaging in an act of cruelty towards those who stand towards those who have the exact same class interests as them, right? It's something that I talk about quite a bit when talking about companies like, Bain and McKinsey, like consulting agencies that are tasked with mass layoffs at the behest of company profit margins. There are a bunch of different teams at these companies, and it's no different than the ways in which, back in the day, a firing line would be given weapons where some people would have duds like blanks and other people would have real bullets. And the real reason why they did this, is so that people could, sleep at night, not knowing if it was their bullet that actually killed the person or if it's actually not the bullet or if they just shot a blank. There is a compartmentalization of and a normal process here that takes the blame, the individual blame, out of your hands. Yeah. Or the lethal injection with 2 buttons, one just for being for show. Yeah, a diffusion of responsibility. Exactly. When you're working in a much larger structure, when you're simply a cog in this machine, a machine that is churning out so much death and destruction, it feels as though you're just playing your part. It makes it much easier for you to just sit there and say, well, this is just my job. I'm simply just doing my job. I'm not the one who ultimately is responsible for this death and destruction. And that's how you arrive at this, and also the perverse incentive structure that they have, right? Even in a company like this, where you know, when you're engaging in like insurance claims, where you get more money for fucking people over further, even if the person you're fucking over is identical to you in their financial circumstances, it causes you to overlook that reality so that you can focus exclusively on your immediate financial gain. Okay? Conspiracy. Oh my God, big dogs. Man, you are so fucking annoying, dude. Holy shit. Conspiracies are real, and correctly identifying them doesn't make you crazy. Historical forces determine history, but individual agency exists and can matter. Understanding this isn't reactionary. Yeah, except you just said that individual agency exists and can matter. And in order for any number of different conspiracies to actually be correct and actually be real, you need not just individual agency, you need to apply tens of thousands of people working in the most competent manner possible to engage in this kind of conspiracy. Always go back to COVID narratives, right? Like, there are a shit ton of people who just genuinely were so brain broken by for-profit healthcare that they thought that the numbers of people who were dying of COVID were just false. You would need millions, not just tens of thousands, millions of healthcare professionals all across the globe working with their own individual federal health agencies all across the globe, working alongside epidemiologists all across the globe to create this grand narrative that COVID was actually killing people when it wasn't. Okay? No, you need to find a guy and pin him on a corkboard. Also, medicine is good and RFK is a charlatan. Okay, you don't believe in that conspiracy, but you're believing in a fucking little, relatively harmless conspiracy on this one. My point is that the fundamentals are still the same. Also, Lolo literally expressed skepticism of the Luigi story. Sure, I'll ask him further when I see him. I don't really care, though. Like, so what? Okay, I have disagreements with Lol Overruled. I don't have to agree with 100% of the things that he says. Every conspiracy theory is impossible until it's published by a journalist. Do you think that your haphazardly put together assessment of a situation is the same as like a journalist who actually did investigative reporting? Like, you're looking at fucking Twitter threads and TikTok videos and then rehashing them in this chat. Journalists, on the other hand, oftentimes, if they're not working for the State Department, are literally actually doing investigative reporting. What the fuck are we doing, man? All right, we're going to get into the Matt Gaetz conversation in a second.
Things like this are one of the big reasons why people hate insurance companies. This company has absolutely ruined people's lives. 100% completely undeniable. And
Lolo didn't express skepticism. He said people should stop talking like this guy admitted shit, and if you care at all, stop assuming shit for the state. Yeah.
When I think back to that lady who was dying, she didn't deserve this. Nobody deserves